Well, by trade, I am a slate and metal roofer. Most of my work is spent in historic restoration. And there was a day where minded my own business, and this image just seared into all of me. It wasn't just my imagination, it was in me. Not the sort of thing I think would ever be called a mystical experience if we're listening to the classics, but it was a very potent reverie. I just saw Joseph walking into his workshop and seeing Jesus just absolutely distraught. He'd never seen him like that before. And it was just that one scene. I've had some, fanciful imaginations working through scripture before, but this was just a different kind of potent. And it wouldn't leave me alone. It just would not leave me alone. It was relentless for 2 or 3 weeks, just nonstop. So finally, I had to just write it. I just had to write, and I didn't know all the way where it was going, but I just had to write that scene out. And then I had a short story of Yosef and Yeshua dealing with this really difficult moment in his formation. Sent it out to friends and family that had shared, writing exercises with each other before, and basically just asked, am I straying into heresy with this? Is this okay? Everybody read it, and the feedback was good, and I felt disburdened. It wasn't gnawing at me anymore. I'd gotten it out. But then I would be surprised to find out that wasn't the end of it. There's more story to write, and so what began as something like could have been done as a one scene play on a stage in church, filled out into a chapter, and then there they are, and there's peril right outside their door, and became a book. Yeah, well, I think it's been about 15 years or so that I've been studying in a pocket of Second Temple Judaism. So trying to understand Scripture in the context of the people of that day. What was in the atmosphere of their ideas? When they use this expression, what does that mean? And it's been a long process of learning how much is lost in translation, which is not to say that we have bad translations, but we miss the idioms in many cases. And worse than that, we miss scriptural allusions or references to stories that they're all familiar with. So the hyperlinks were there for them, but without eyes to see it, we don't always pick up how dense the passages are and how much is behind the story that we're reading. So that mode of study has been with me for a while. Writing this story was different in that it was immersing me into it on a daily basis. And so it's no longer ideas, but now they're real people. This is what they dress like. This is their lifestyle. These are the problems they deal with on a daily basis. And it was a strange experience to be writing things. Like, nobody's behind me. I'm not ripping stuff off. I'm making this story happen. And then the characters are teaching me things as we move through the process. And I'm being surprised by decisions they make. And I can feel Yosef's angst at being the father of kind of a big deal when it comes to people in the world. He's you put it, you told me that it was like realizing that Joseph was his stepdad, and to get inside his emotional space in dealing with that. So we get the lullaby effect when we read through the New Testament. And the gospel is like Jesus is born, and then there's the Annunciation, and then he's circumcised, and then there's da-da-da-da-da. We just kind of click through the things, but it didn't go that way for them. And to feel the weight of even the mundane things in their life, what they were waking up to, how they were going to bed, and the problems they're dealing with in between, and the good and the bad, seeing the joys that they would share with each other, and being able to contextualize their daily prayers and blessings that are just regularly on their lips, being able to sit with that and feel it as part of the story, to feel it as part of their life. And in that way, it felt a lot like being there with them. And now, on this side of it, it's like I have them as conversation partners with me. They've become real people. And Joseph, Yosef taught me how to practice better patience at home. Yeshua, learned a lot from him about keeping yourself no matter what situation you're in. And so to imagine him having those capacities as a younger man, things that we see him doing in the gospel accounts where he's always himself, and he always has full charge of himself, and he's also fully empathic with people. He really feels their stuff, but it never governs him. He's never owned by it, even as much as he gives himself to people. And to imagine what that meant for him as a little guy coming up. The passage that has unnerved me for a long time is it's after that temple episode where we see Joseph and Miriam freaking out that they can't find him. In 3 days, I mean, how quickly we read over that passage, right? 3 days they can't find him. And then after that episode, he reckons with them, and the writers tell us that he grew in strength and wisdom. But what does that even mean? All of our theology tells us that this is a perfect being. This is God in the flesh. And he grew in strength and wisdom. So the story gave me a means to try to flesh that out some. We don't have much other than imagination to enter into those years between 12 and 30, right? Well, one of the tenets from the days of Second Temple Judaism, they held that study was the highest form of worship. That didn't replace prayer. It didn't replace their sacrifices or their festivals. But the daily study, being immersed in the Torah, being conversant with the text, having it in them. They carry it with them wherever they go. It's the lens through which they see the world. To bring that frame of reference into a story and into writing it, it was like an extension of that kind of study for me, where there's been a lot that I've taken in, and I'll be metabolizing it for a long time, I mean, the rest of my life. But then to try to give it wheels, to try to take some of the things that might appear cryptic and then make them visceral, make them truths that are embodied in me, because I spent time with the people that lived those stories out. It was very much an act of worship to sit down and write the story. And it was scary. Yeah, it was at many points terrifying to presume to write words into the mouth of our Messiah that we don't have inscripturated. I always felt like I was stepping out into peril doing that. And there was also something compelling me, like I couldn't go without doing that. This was something that I had to write. I had to work it out. Otherwise, it was always going to have a hold on me. And now it still does. It still has a hold on me, but in a better way. It's something that I can hold on to as well. And we can talk to each other. And it's definitely informed the way that I read Scripture, where that's conversant too. You know, the passage is in us, and we turn it over, and it takes on new meaning, and we see it in different angles of light. One of my concerns working through it is just how volatile church culture tends to be. There's so many different theological preferences and convictions, and all of them have been long fought and established for centuries, and everybody's right. So there's no small amount of people poised to be offended. And that's a thing that I actively avoid in as much as it's in my power to do. And at the same time, there's just moments where these are people that have to make a decision. And the situation that's in front of them is a really awful situation to deal with. And so it could be the case that they have nothing but an awful decision to make in the face of it. Never, ever wanted to offend anybody. And so I have taken some cares to give space to all the different approaches to Scripture. We all have the problem when our favorite book gets turned into a movie and we don't like the way they imagined our character, or they didn't get this scene right, or they wrote this part out. And I'm just thinking, oh, it's got to be so much worse to take the Bible and make a story that we don't have in the Bible. I mean, how many people are there poised to be bothered by what I did with their favorite character? And I don't really have any way of being at rest about that. The beta readers that have been involved with me during the process have been helpful. They've all been very enthusiastic with their responses, and so there's some encouragement there. But what happens with the potentiality of this reaching a wider audience, I really don't know. And so at this point, I feel like there's nothing else for me to do but to step into the punch. I've done the best I know how to do with it, and I can't do any better than I am now, right? There were times in the writing where one of those moments would surprise me, and it would just have me. And there I am, there's a sense in which I made the thing happen, but then there's another sense in which once I begin looking at it, it's remaking me. And there's plenty of times in my study where I just cried my face off of my face, seeing a moment of tenderness between father and son, or seeing a father dealing with a peril in the world, protecting his children, tension between Joseph and Miriam. I mean, there's all kinds of times where once it was in front of me, I just had to stop and give myself space to weep. And then that's going to remain with me, the gravity of that moment between them. There's also times where I laughed pretty heavy, like, that's funny. And it wasn't even like it was my joke that I had written. It was like somebody had told me the joke, and then I'm laughing at it. And so the fun thing was when I'm letting other people read it as it's in process, they're telling me about the things that they were laughing at. They're telling me about the things they were crying about. Or times where they would understand something about Yeshua that they hadn't understood before. And it was because of seeing him as a teenager made sense of these other more cryptic passages of him as a man. Same thing with Yosef, same thing with Miriam, his cousin, Yochanan, right? There's dimensions that came to life for people because they were working through the story. So honestly, if somebody only read chapter 1 and they got to a point where they went, is that how that happened? And they put the book down and they sat back and then just meditated on that. And if that gave them any angle of approach to Scripture or a different way of just immersing into the Gospels that we have, that's a big win for me. Big win. I don't need somebody to finish the book for me to feel like there was purpose in having written it. And my favorite moments, for all the laughing, for all the crying, for all the, oh, that phrase, that was great, for those sorts of responses, my favorite times have been when a family is reading it together in their living room, and you got kids spanning 18 down to 5 years old, and mom and dad are there too, when they would put the book down and say, is that how that happened? And they would spend an hour talking about something or several things from Scripture. That's the best thing. That's the best thing that could happen. If my book in any way pushes somebody deeper in their worship of the Lord or their study of Scripture, if it infuses their prayer, big win. I don't care what page that happens on. If they don't ever make it to the end, I'm good. I think the Kickstarter platform is elegant in many ways. A thing that I like about it the most in this context is how much it protects the backer. So if somebody decides to back the project, I'm then contractually obligated to satisfy their investment in the project. I don't get to go have a Vegas spree after everybody drops their money. So I like that the investor, the backer, is protectable. And also, if we don't achieve the goal, everybody gets their money back. And so again, there's protection there. The manuscript is written. I'm not asking anybody to fund the writing. The problem is that with my level of income and my family, it's impossible to tell how long it would take me to drum up the funds to do this on my own. Whereas if it's a story that's enticing to people and it's something that they want to see come into existence, they get to help me expedite that process. And they get to do it for the cost of a book. So it's not even like it's asking for a heavier load on anybody's part. So yeah, backing the project would be helpful. The prospects of seeing this thing get out there into the atmosphere are very enticing. And I've linked chapter 1 to the campaign so that everybody has that as a teaser trailer. If they read chapter 1 and they want to go along for the rest of the ride, come on in. If they read chapter 1 and they say, not for me, no hard feelings. Definitely don't want anybody feeling guilted into it. If there's not a natural draw, well then, maybe it wasn't a story worth writing. I think I've collected pretty good fruit already in what it's done in people that I trust. I know it's been fruitful in my life. It's been difficult to come to this place, but I like the idea now of trying to share it with a wider audience. Honestly, most of the motivation is just so I get to have those conversations with people. I want to see what Jesus looks like to them when they spend time with the story. I've done my best to try to present some of my imagination of him and his life with his family, but I want to hear what it sounds like to you. I want to hear what he looks like through your eyes. Having a story like this and potentially a culture that develops around it, man, being able to have that dialogue with a lot of people that come to trust each other because of a story they engaged, I think that's the most exciting prospect for me right now.